Dare to enter Crow's Quill's books, where tales of forgotten realms and fearless souls come alive. Today's journey, Operation DarkStar, Chapter 31 to Chapter 32, by Mark Lindsay. Will you uncover the truth hidden in the shadows? Chapter 31. Practice and repetition took over. Tarnay and Bam Bam took point. They formed a tight formation as they made their way to the building's entrance. The windows out were heavily coated in years' worth of dirt and grime. Paige wiped a small circle with her sleeve and was quick to peer outside. The rest of the team waited with bated breath. The teenaged girl's eyes darted up and down the street. She was looking for any sign of danger, any movement, any sign of the monsters roaming the surface. Satisfied, she gave the signal that all was clear. Tentatively, they exited the building. Saul allowed himself a few seconds to take in the scene that greeted him. It was a sight that never failed to fill him with both dread and awe. The sky, as always, was now eternally night, but there was something else in it, a slight blue cosmic hue to it that hinted of other forces somehow at work. Hot air fissures exploded from weak points in the earth. The ground around them glowed red, hinting at molten ore laying directly beneath. It was as if the earth itself were hemorrhaging from the opening of the demon portals. And yet despite this, the air was chilly, their breath clearly visible. After the night of the reckoning, the monsters that had found their way into the mortal realm had spent the following days, weeks, months, and years feasting upon humanity, and whatever else was made of blood and flesh. The initial power surge that had opened the portals was then reabsorbed back into the black meteorite a year later, and with the power the portals disappeared as well. But by then the damage had been done. Millions of monsters had been unleashed upon an unsuspecting society, and any plans by military and government were too late. When the demons' new food supply was exhausted, they had then started hunting each other. 8 years later, what remained was the worst of the worst. Monstrosities from the abyss. The only good that came of their cannibalism was the smaller number left behind. "Damn, you can't beat that aroma," Apache said, taking a huge lungful of air. "Yeah, like a cross between sulfur and ass," Tarnay breathed with a bitter expression. "Is it getting worse out here?" Sarah asked, concerned. "What are you talking about? It's shittier every time I stick my head up here." Bam Bam replied. "Yes, it's shitty. We know this. Do we have to have the same discussion every time we come up?" Scott frowned. "You got somewhere else you'd rather be at the moment?" Scott asked. "As a matter of fact, yes, I'd rather be in Vegas, Caesar's Palace, with some company. Heaps of company. Champagne and pizza, burgers. I'd kill for a burger right now," Bam Bam said, just warming up. "What's champagne?" Paige asked, playing coy. "I was only a little girl when all this happened," Paige added. Bam Bam immediately fell silent. "I'm sorry. In fact, what's a burger?" Paige asked again. Bam Bam frowned and looked toward the teenage girl. "Are you serious? You never had a burger before?" Bam Bam asked. Paige stared back, her eyes wide and sad. There was a snigger behind Bam Bam, then another. The biker turned around to find the rest of the team holding back laughter. "What's a fork?" Paige said. He swung around to see Paige laughing hard. "You are way too easy," she sniggered. You little manipulator. I blame you for this," Bam Bam said, pointing towards Sarah, who feigned denial. "She used to be such a sweet young girl, before you taught her to be otherwise," Bam Bam snorted. "It's okay, buddy. Little Miss had it over you when she was 9, Apache said, clapping a hand on his friend's shoulder. "Hey, that goes for me as well," Apache added. "Don't be mad, Uncle Bam Bam," Paige said, blowing him a kiss. More laughter from the group. "All right, now that everyone has had their fun, let's move out," Scott said. They moved like an experienced fighting unit, each member knowing their place and their duties, each member aware of what they were supposed to do. Eyes slowly adjusted to the darkness as they swept the street. Scott's jaw tensed at their surroundings. It was devoid of any movement. The only signs of previous life were the skeletal remains of topside humanity. They lay scattered on the road, sidewalks, and in derelict cars. Men, women, and children, victims of the monsters, now wrapped in rotting clothes. "It's like the color has left the world," Sarah said from behind. "Black and gray is all that's left," Scott replied. Something enormous swooped overhead. Everyone took cover and scanned the skies. They could all see large, leathery, bat-like wings the size of a small plane. The body looked like a legless rat, partially obscured by the eternal night sky. It let loose with a roar that sounded like an elephant crossed with a baboon. No one moved or said a word. The creature circled twice before moving on, looking for prey. Scott signaled them to move on. They passed derelict buildings, roads violently torn up, the scattered remains of ruined cars. Street after street, nothing changed. Just more proof of the death of a once great civilization. Saul and Scott had marked out a precise path to the river. Neither man wanted the team to stay out longer than they had to. Cutting through an underpass, Scott directed the team towards a nature reserve, heavy with trees and overgrown scrub. Tarnay was the first down the pathway. He ignored the children's monkey bars and seesaw, now overgrown with weeds and vines. The ex-Marine followed the sound of running water, which led him towards a large waterway. It had grown swollen and wild since being left unchecked for so long. "There's a crossing point just up ahead," Scott said. The group patrolled down a slight embankment, the area getting thicker with trees, blocking out even more ambient light than any of them were comfortable with. "Well, that's just fucking great," Bam Bam said, pointing to the trail ahead. At some point during one of the many brutal storms that had ripped its way through the city, the rising turbulent waters had wrenched the bridge apart. What was left was a timber skeleton. 3 timber piers, one on each side and one in the middle, held together by a thick girder and partial railing, the running water making the remnants of the bridge sway back and forth. "We need to turn back. This way is a washout," Paige said. "If we do that, we're adding 40. Maybe an hour onto the trip," Saul said, in a tone that didn't hide that he was clearly not happy with this current development. "That's unacceptable," Apache added. "We know," Scott replied. "Fuck this," Tarnay said, as he strode over to the bridge to get a better look, giving the timber a shake with one hand. Something in the water nearby stirred. Everyone pointed their weapons in that direction. "Hold your fire," Scott hissed, activating the high-intensity torch on his assault rifle. It lit up the waters around them. Dozens of eyes stared back from above the water's surface, human-shaped heads. "More demons," Sarah said, her finger tense on her trigger, awaiting the call from Scott to blast them away. Every single member of the team was awaiting their orders, except for the teenage girl. "Don't shoot. They're not demons. I think they're human." Paige's voice trailed off, as the gravity of her words sunk into the group. The faces that peered back from the water were painfully white, like creatures on the bottom of the ocean. Black eyes filled with madness returned their gaze. "I don't care what they are," Apache said, taking a step forward. "No," Scott countered. Apache tensed, his expression annoyed. "What now?" the biker growled. "I don't like this either. But it appears that they're not trying to harm us, Scott said. If they are human, we'd be doing the poor bastards a favor by killing them, Apache replied. It was clear. He didn't like what he was seeing and wanted to end his discomfort. We don't need to be alerting something we can't handle. Leave them be and let's cross this bridge, Saul said, his words final. Bam Bam insisted on going first. They all watched intently as he balanced himself on the crossbeams and walked across the black waters like a tightrope walker. From his vantage, he could see the people in the water, close to 24. Men and women, naked and pale. They looked like otters. The biker wondered what they would do if he fell into their waters. He suppressed a shudder and continued on. Once his feet were back on firm ground, he signaled for the others to follow. Scott kept his assault rifle trained on the faces in the water. I thought you said they were harmless, Apache said from behind. The former Delta operator didn't need to turn to know that the biker had a huge smirk on his face. I said they appear harmless. I'll not take chances, Scott said, turning his attention away for a split second. Paige was halfway across the ruined bridge when her foot found a patch of slimy moss. The teenage girl had no time to recover as she fell headlong into the black waters, which immediately began to thrash as the humanoid heads made their way towards her. Get her out, Tarnay cried. Jared had already leapt in after the girl, his axe raised high, as Scott unleashed a barrage into the white faces within the waterway. Rounds ripped apart the heads of some too slow. Most dived out of sight. Paige emerged from the water, her lungs screaming for air. No sooner had she shown her face when the pale creatures fell upon her. They snarled and hissed, baring teeth and wide-eyed madness. One attempted to bite her shoulder, only to feel a large hand grip its neck from behind. Jared squeezed with all his might until there was a loud, audible crack. It fell limp beneath the water. Silently, the large ex-firefighter swung his axe. It connected with another man. The blade biting into its head with a sickening crunch. Eyes went wide, as if in the split second of its death, sanity had once again been restored. Several hands reached down and pulled Paige from the water. Sarah, Bam Bam, and Tarnay scooping the teenaged girl and lifting her once again onto the timber crossbeam. Apache and Scott continued to fire their weapons into the water. Jared not wasting the opportunity, he continued to swing his weapon in a wide arc as he made his way back to the bank. Two more of the creatures fell into the river, its black water masking the blood spilled within. Scott and Apache pulling the ex-firefighter quickly back onto dry land. Everyone keeping their weapons covered on the rippling water, waiting for any sign of a second attack. After several long, tense minutes, they silently continued their way across the waterway. Only after each member had crossed, Sarah broke the silence. What were they? I think they were people once, Tarnay replied. Bullshit, Apache interjected. They weren't demons. Not with white skin, Saul said. If they were people, what happened to them? Were they somehow infected? Paige asked, shivering from cold and wet. Sarah wrapped an arm around the younger girl. In a way. I think they were people, like us, unable to survive like what we did. They adapted in the only way they could. Trying to become like the monsters from the portals, Scott said in pity. I'd rather eat a bullet than become like that, Bam Bam said in disgust. No one truly knows what they'll do when they look into the black void, Sarah said. Well, if we've done discussing this, let's get somewhere where Paige and Jared can dry off, Saul suggested. No one argued, everyone keen to leave this place behind. Chapter 32. They built a small fire under a freeway overpass, being careful to keep the flames hidden. The bikers, Tarnay and Scott, kept the ends covered, while Saul and Sarah helped Jared and Paige dry out, the teenaged girl's lips already turning blue. "This is a good start," Paige stammered. "My guts are churning." "You got lucky, young lady," Saul frowned. "He's right," Sarah added. "I hardly meant to fall," Paige said, shivering. "We realize that, but—" "Shh." They all turned as Scott moved swiftly towards them, his face strained. "What is it?" Saul asked. Scott kicked dirt over the fire. It went out with a plume of ash and smoke. The Delta operator crouched down as his eyes adjusted to the darkness. "We're being watched," Scott hissed. "Are you sure?" Sarah asked. "Since we left the creek. I wasn't sure at first. I thought it might have been paranoia," Scott said. "How many? Where are they?" Sarah pressed. "At least a pair, but I'm not assuming that they're alone." "What do we do now?" Paige asked. Scott sent Paige and Bam Bam down with Tarnay to create a presence where Scott had last seen the figures watching over them. The Delta operator then led Sarah, Saul, Jared, and Apache out the other end of the overpass. Using the heavy vegetation growth, they crept around until they held the high ground. With Scott's Special Forces experience and 8 years of surviving in a constant nightmarish scenario where everything now wanted to eat, humans meant that they had all fine-tuned their hunting and stealth techniques. It took them 10 minutes of crawling around in the dark until they reached a position where Scott could see something. 3 figures crouched in a small grove of trees. It was clear that they were observing the overpass. One figure fidgeting nervously. "Axe. Stay back. You'll be our ace in the hole if this turns bad. Sarah's the quietest one here along with myself. We'll move directly towards them. Saul and Apache will flank them on the right. There's a small depression in the ground there. That utilities building to their left will prevent them from going in that direction, and if they try to retreat down the hill, they'll end on the bad side of Bam Bam, Paige, and Tarnay," Scott whispered. "So we're taking prisoners?" Apache asked in a low tone. "These are the first survivors we've seen in over a year. I want them alive," Scott stressed. "And what if they're like those fucking freaks in the water?" Apache asked. "Keep your voice down," Sarah hissed. "I'll be in the forefront. It's my decision to make," Scott said in a low growl. Apache tensed and was about to protest this, but Sarah's firm hand warned him otherwise. The former biker kept silent. However, he was adamant that this discussion would be shelved for a later date. They all moved into position. From there, they waited and watched as Scott and Sarah moved slowly towards their quarry. Scott's weapon was at the ready. He was hoping that Apache wasn't right. But too much time had passed since they had seen anyone sane and whole topside. There was no moon anymore, no stars that they could see, just an ever-stretching darkness. Even with all his training and moving silently, he never saw the twig beneath his foot. It snapped loudly under the pressure of his foot. In the silence of the night, it might as well have been a gunshot. "Shit," he hissed. The 3 figures twitched at Scott's stumble. They were lying low and armed as 2 laser dots began to search the black for a target. Fuck, Apache hissed. "Don't do anything," Saul instructed, grabbing the other man's shoulder. They both strained to see in the eternal night, their hearts pounding. Keeping as low as he could, with his weapon held firm, Axe started to slowly crawl towards the potential conflict. Scott could hear 2 male voices talking heatedly. To the Delta operator, this was a good sign. "Do you trust me?" Scott said to Sarah. She looked taken aback. "What do you mean?" Sarah replied. And before she could ask another question, Scott stood up. "Hey, we know you're there. You don't have to hide. If you have good intentions, you needn't worry," Scott said, loud enough to be heard by the people hiding, but hopefully not by anything else. "Are you crazy?" Sarah hissed, trying to pull him back down to safety. He shook her away. "I know you've been following us for a while. I'm guessing that your numbers are fewer than mine," Scott added. There was a long silence. Then the two red dot lasers found Scott's chest. "No!" Sarah yelled, knowing that the time for warning had passed. Scott looked down at the two red marks on his jacket. "There's no need for that. I've done this in good faith," Scott said. "Tell the others to stand up as well," a tense male voice called back. "I don't think that's necessary," Scott said. "Well, I fucking do," the male voice replied. "This is taking too long," Scott thought to himself. "That's not going to happen. I've taken the first step. You need to take the next," Scott said, waiting for a response. In the distance, he could hear voices talking. However, he was not in a position to determine whether this was a good or a bad thing. "We know there are quite a few of you," another voice called out. This one was female. "That's right. I'm telling you that we have the numbers, and tactically, we have you at a disadvantage. If we can't end this peaceably, then you'll leave me no choice," Scott said regretfully. Laughter greeted him. "You forget, we have you dead to rights," the male voice sneered, the red dots still planted on Scott's chest. Two men, one woman. They were all dressed in a mixture of military and warm hunting clothing. They all carried various weapons. The men had the laser sights of their assault rifles pointed on Scott. The female was busy trying to come up with a plan that would see them become dominant in this scenario. All three totally fixated on surviving that they failed to notice the large figure moving up behind them until it was too late. "What the fuck is that?" one of the males yelled as something large and sharp whizzed past his head. Instinctually, he rolled and raised his rifle. Everything happened so quickly, a horrible thought occurred to Scott. He looked back, but couldn't see him. "Where's Axe?" Scott growled, his meaning becoming apparent to Sarah. "Axe!" she yelled out, just as one of the men opened fire on a tall, dark figure. Half a dozen muzzle flashes lit up the area, and in that split second, Scott forgot all about his own safety and raced towards the skirmish, followed closely by Sarah. More shots fired. "Stop!" Scott yelled. Both men continued to fire into the figure until it slumped to the ground. "Motherfucker." Man of his word. "He tried to flank us," one of the men growled as he advanced towards the fallen figure, the intention of checking its condition with the toe of his boot. What they didn't expect was the figure to suddenly jump up. 9 feet tall, humanoid in shape, but with 3 extra powerful arms and the grotesque head of a spider. It roared a scream from a mouth with too many teeth. They fired another burst dead center into the beast, which appeared to have no effect. Scott and the others were closing in, but still too far to be of assistance. One of the men was knocked from his feet, just as the weapon of the other man clicked empty. The creature grabbed him by the shoulder, its mouth opening wider than the man ever thought possible. Translucent drool running down its chin as it viewed its next meal with hundreds of eyes. The man gritted his teeth as the monster's face pulled close. Rancid breath struck the man's face. He tried to recoil, but was held fast. Then something struck the beast on the side of the head from behind. Black blood splashed the man across the face at the same time. The monster dropped him to the ground, screeching in agony, just as a second blow hit the creature at the neck and removed the head from sight. The monster toppled forward to the ground, more blood gushing from the stump that had been a neck a second earlier. The man stared up to see Jared standing before him, splashed with black blood, his giant axe in hand. By the time the man had recovered his wits, Scott and Sarah had arrived, their weapons raised, unsure of what they might find. The other man, who had been thrown earlier by the creature, had also recovered. He arrived with his rifle at the ready. "Lower your weapons," he growled. "Lower your own," Apache replied, his expression suggesting that he was spoiling for a fight. He was quickly joined by Tarnay, Bam Bam, and Paige, who had heard the commotion and come running. The man with the raised weapon would not be coward, though. "You'll have to kill me," the man said. "Lee," the other man on the ground called out. "You're outnumbered. Don't be a fool," Saul insisted. "Lee." "Not now, Rob," Lee said. "Lee, listen to me," Rob persisted. "Rob, can't you see?" "Lower your weapon. The big fella saved my life." "They're not the enemy," Rob said as Saul helped him to his feet. Reason was finally settling in. Lee lowered his weapon. "I swear we're not here to hurt you," Scott said, emphasizing the last part. "I know that, which is why we've been watching you for the past month," a female voice spoke up. They all turned towards a figure emerging from the darkness. She was dressed like Lee and Rob, slim, premature gray hair, and eyes that had seen too much. She carried herself with confidence. "Who are you?" Saul asked suspiciously. "My name is Peta, Dr. Peta Booth, and we have a lot to talk about," she said cryptically. That seals today's tale in shadows. We hope Operation DarkStar has drawn you deeper into its enigma. Return soon to Crow's Quill's books, where the next chapter awaits, whispering secrets yet untold.